What's going on, y'all? It's Joe from Petty Fixes, and welcome back to the channel. So I got a new case. Enermax actually reached out to me and they offered to send me their Equilence. It's one of their newer mid-tower cases, and I've actually never owned a mid-tower case, believe it or not. I've always owned a cube style case. So for me, this is kind of a new thing, new territory for me, because I've never actually reviewed a mid-tower case. I'm always focused on the cube style cases because that's what appeals to me personally. Enermax actually advertises this case as a water cooling case and as a silence case. It has tempered glass on it, a tempered glass window. It has very unique features only found on this case, and especially at this price point. You're not going to be able to find a lot of the things at this price point that you'll find in other cases. So with that said, guys, let's go ahead and jump to the video. Reviewing a mid-tower case isn't something that I'm used to. As someone who loves the style and flexibility of a cube style case, and I've only ever built in a cube style case, this is kind of new to me. When I first came across the Equilence, I saw it as an attractive case that just so happened to be the perfect case for a custom loop project, so I was pretty happy that Enermax sent me a unit. At first glance, the Equilence is a very premium looking case. The all metal construction for the chassis and the tinted tempered glass window to show off your build is all the rage right now. The front of the case features a plastic panel that appears also to be a tempered glass panel, but this is just a shiny black acrylic panel that looks like glass. Along the sides are the fan intake grills with the Enermax logo right in the middle of that. The logo actually lights up red once powered up. There's plenty of space between the front panel and the actual chassis to mount fans and allow them to intake air properly, something that's missing from a lot of cases nowadays for aesthetic reasons. Taking off that front panel, there's a removable magnetic dust filter, and you can also see there's space for 320mm fans. You can also fit up to a 360mm radiator there as well. There's also some sound isolating material along the back of this panel, running all the way the full length. Moving to the top of the case, there's the I/O ports trimmed in a glossy black plastic similar to the front acrylic part of the case. There's two USB 2.0 ports, the microphone and headphone jack ports, two USB 3.0 ports, a 3-speed fan controller, the reset button, and the power button. All of these I/O ports are actually illuminated by red trim. It's pretty cool because it's a welcome addition for a case such as this, and at this price point you will never see something like this. Going further back, you can see the sound dampening pad. Removing that gets you access to the fan grills. You can fit 3 120mm or 240mm fans. You can also fit up to a 360mm radiator up here as well. Speaking of that sound dampening pad, removing it requires a little force, as Enermax has made this piece with outstanding quality. It's magnetic and the magnets are pretty strong, so it stays in place with no worry of ever coming out. You can see the thick sound dampening material that they use here as well. Now moving to the back of the case, there's nothing really to see here except for the usual. There's the I/O port for the motherboard, 120mm to 140mm fan mount, an abundance of PCIe slots, and the power supply bay. On the bottom of the case, there's obviously the case feet. They are the plastic nature, but they're pretty wide and run across the width of the case. They do have a padding on it so that you won't scratch the surface if you slide the case along it. There's also a nice large dust filter for the PSU. It's pretty nice, it's very fine mesh material, and it's pretty well made. Let's check out the inside of this case. Taking off the glass side panel, the thumb screws are actually kind of short, and I like this because you won't spend so much time unscrewing the screws. The glass panel is 4mm thick, which is pretty standard nowadays. There's a border of padding along the inside of the chassis behind the panel, which helps in sound isolation. Inside you'll find a pretty unique layout, one of the things that actually attracted me to this case to begin with. Starting with the bottom, you have a full-length PSU basement, a power supply basement. There's a massive Enermax logo emblazoned across the side of it. Along the top of the basement, there are holes for routing cables to the motherboard, which is pretty nice. There's also a hole to route cables coming from the graphics card, which is pretty cool because it helps clean up the case a little bit. There's a cutout towards the front of the case where you can fit a 360mm radiator at. Speaking of the front of the case, you'll find a unique placement for a 240mm radiator, right smack dab beside the motherboard tray. But this is a pretty cool idea, and I'm surprised more premium priced cases don't employ such an idea. You can also fit two 120mm fans here, and it also looks like you have a couple of SSD mounts here as well. This case supports ATX, micro ATX, and mini ITX motherboards. It supports video cards up to 420mm in length, but 280mm with the side radiator. There's tons of grommets and holes to route the cables, and there's plenty of space for water cooling potential, which is another reason I'm glad they sent this to me, but more on that in a minute. Let's move to the other side of the case. Now taking off the panel, there's just two screws that hold that panel on. There's a groove along the bottom of the panel that actually catches onto the chassis of the case and prevents them from just falling off when you remove the screws. Another nice touch for a case like this. Taking it off, this panel also has the sound isolating material on it just like the top panel. Here you can see all the cable management space. Along the left side there's actually a little more space because the chassis actually moves towards the front a little bit to allow cable routing to the front of the case. Here you'll find the usual assortment of cables that hook up to the I/O and stuff. There's 2 places to mount SSDs on removable trays that unscrew from the case. I like this feature because it's really easy to mount stuff there. Moving towards the bottom, you'll find the PSU area and there's more space for cable management. It's a nice big area and you shouldn't have any trouble fitting even the biggest of power supplies in it. Moving to the left of this area, there's the hard drive bay with 2 slots to use for hard drive storage. These can also be used as SSD trays as well. Now they're pretty flimsy, you know they're plastic, but that really doesn't bother me. But the only thing that does bother me about this part is that you cannot remove this drive tray at all. It's not removable, it's bolted onto the case. So you're gonna have to manage your cables a little bit better. I would like it if this was removable, but hey, what are you gonna do? Enermax has included their usual allotment of screws in a white box that sits in the bottom tray. Enermax is always generous in sending a ton of accessories with their products, so it's always great to open up a product from them just to see what surprises you get. Building in this case was actually a pretty pleasurable experience. Cable routing was a breeze, mounting options for the fans are plentiful, and the case came with pre-installed standoffs for the motherboard so that you don't have to worry about doing it yourself. As for how quiet the case is, well, it's definitely a lot more quieter than some others, and the sound isolating material definitely helps. I've replaced the stock fans with some Corsair HD 120 RGB fans. These are notoriously powerful and kind of loud fans. Now while still audible at full speed, they're definitely a great deal quieter because of the engineering of this case. One gripe I do have about this case, is really the only one, is the lack of a space to actually mount a pump or a reservoir. Now for me, water cooling is actually pretty new to me, but I'm actually really interested in it. And I saw this case and the stock images have this thing water cooled completely to the max. There's absolutely no space to mount a pump, reservoir, or anything like that. So I would have liked for them to include that, but at this price point I can't really complain. Alright, so that's pretty much my overview and my review of the Enermax Equilence case. Now as you know, the case has a ton of unique features. There's a lot of stuff going on good with this case that I love. I absolutely love the case. I'm definitely going to make this case my daily case from now into the foreseeable future. And I have a project coming up in this case, so y'all stay tuned for that one. But let's talk about some things that I don't like about the case, because nothing's perfect. The first thing, and really the biggest gripe that I have about this case, is that although it is advertised as a water cooling case, there's nowhere to actually mount a pump or a reservoir onto the basement, onto the PSU basement, or the power supply shroud. That's one of the things that I noticed, because in their stock images, you can see, I'll put a picture up, but you can see that they definitely advertise this thing as a water cooling dream, and they actually have it mounted onto the power supply shroud horizontally, which is kind of weird. You know, I don't understand how they got it mounted without some modifications, but I think I'm going to actually have to look into it and do some modifications myself. So that's really the only big thing that I don't like about the case. I know I said I had a couple, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to ignore those because it's not really much. I mean, I guess the other little thing would be that you can't remove the hard drive tray at the bottom on the back of the case or whatever, but that's really it, you know. Just use it for more cable management space, you know, but that's really all. So the case is a dream to work with, guys. It's easy to build in. There's a lot of space in the case. There's a lot of unique features about the case too. So with that said, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and call this video short. If you guys like my channel, you like what I do on my channel, drop me a like on this video. Also, if you can, subscribe to my channel because I got a lot of great content coming up. I got so much stuff, so many projects coming up, guys. I kind of can't keep up, and there's a lot of stuff. My channel's booming, and it's thanks to you guys that, you know, I really do appreciate it. So also, I forgot to mention, I hit 200 subscribers, and for me that's kind of a big deal. So I'm going to be doing a giveaway. So if you guys really want to get in on this giveaway, subscribe to my Twitter, follow me on Twitter, and check out my Facebook page because I'll be announcing details on my Facebook page. With that said, guys, I'm Joe from Petty Fixes. See y'all in the next one.